Hello everyone, it's Lennon, and I've been out here like sunbathing and on my phone, and I noticed a lot of new comments on a video that I posted, like actually one of the first videos that I ever posted, which was my testimony video. Um, Basically just having some sort of base point for how I grew up. I lived in a pretty dogmatic Christian family, and I didn't hold the same beliefs as I had gotten older, and no idea how oppressing and traumatic living that life was looking back now. So I knew that because I wanted this channel of mine to be a space that I hold for myself for experiences moving forward in my spiritual practices, anything that I want to explore and touch base with people who have similar experiences to mine. I knew that the channel was going to be a space for that, a space for myself to hold. And with that being said, I knew that would ultimately have ties into my childhood and my upbringing. And so I didn't really want to have a testimony on the channel, but I knew that when people go to my channel and they see certain spiritual videos and I say, well, I'm still healing from this or that or what have you, they can go back to that video and latch on to certain things in that video. It's like, oh, that's why she's coming from that way. It's about information, right? And I noticed lots of new comments in the last couple weeks, I'll say, on that video. And as of this moment, that happens to be my most popular video on views alone. And while that's great, and I knew that it would draw people, it wasn't, I didn't do it to be brave. I didn't do it to be vulnerable. Yes, it took courage to post it, but it was just a base point for the rest of the channel and what I want to hold space with, right? And it got me thinking about the comments and how some of them aren't nice. Some of them are about going to the dark side and, you are never really a Christian if you believe these things. And, we really want you to come back and see the light. And we, and one comment that stuck out was one phrase, and it said, it sounds like rebellion. And I was immediately triggered because I thought, this person does not know me. Now I get about free speech or whatever the hell, and how this person probably actually thinks that maybe the deconversion I seem to go through was a product of rebellion. And I'm here to tell you that that's not what it was. Having this comment stand out like my spiritual practice doesn't mean anything, and it kind of triggered feelings of guilt and shame that dredge up, like almost like all the trauma, right? It dredged up those feelings of trauma that I've been healing from. And a lot of the comments on that video they talk about, having similar experiences, and that's kind of what I wanted to latch on, and as a base point, but also to latch on and to make others that are going through similar experiences, if they're still going through this, actively healing every day, maybe in the broom closet when it comes in terms of witchcraft, you're not alone. That's what the other purpose of that video was, is to share that you're not alone, and that there are still parts of me that heal because of all of that, and that living that life. And I wanted to come on today as an extension to give some things that, when it comes into in terms of religious trauma, that what that looks like for me, like I said, as an extension to holding space for others that are going through the same type of thing. Some fears about a lot of things that I had living that life, and maybe a call to that person that said that this was just rebellion, and how if it was, the trauma, I'm sorry, but the trauma was real. And so I've written down some bullet points that I wanted to go over. And how these specific bullet points that I want to say, I didn't really want to expand on them too much, but I wanted to tell you these bullet points because these are the actual ones I had the most problems with living this life. I really started listening because my brain was expanding and I was already molded into living that life, that religious life, socially, emotionally, physically. And so I started really, not meditating, but I really started having thoughts of these specific things. Rapture. The rapture is a huge thing in Christianity, okay? This fear of where you're going. And every time the sermon would be on the rapture and be on the book of Revelations, I would think every time I would think, how can we humans speculate something like that? That just didn't make no sense. Like, how are we to ever know? There's no afterlife book, Every time I would ask, how are we supposed to know where we're going? They would be like, you have to have faith, that the Bible is there for us as a protection. And from what? From this fire and brimstone, place that is, some say, is symbolic. The rapture didn't add up for me. And then if it did, if this was something that these Christians are supposed to strive for, we're supposed to be the ones rising up. And even to this day, my mom, there's this cemetery in the small town I grew up that pretty much all of her relatives are buried in, okay? And it's a beautiful place. And to this day, my mom says, I want to be buried here so that when the rapture comes, I'll see all of my loved ones rise up with me. Now, I can see how that is a beautiful image to her. That's the image she holds in her heart when she thinks of the rapture. I never had those it's like, even when you see a sunset, it's like those, you get these, it's almost like an unsettling feeling for me that I got when I would see the sun rays beam through the clouds, or a cemetery that, when we would go to a funeral, it would just be so unsettling for me. And so the rapture was one. Sin was another. This feeling that there were certain things you could not do, right? Actual, sins you cannot commit at all. But then there were little sins. Now, in terms of my Christianity, it wasn't like Catholicism where you had to get forgiveness from a priest or anything. It was more you did that yourself. But if you didn't ask, you weren't getting forgiven. And I thought some of the sins that were being taught to me that were bad or that were sins seemed like natural urges, natural things in the body and in the brain, natural things in terms of development. And that didn't make sense either, because I was like, how can something that naturally happens in the body, that I feel so natural having these feelings, be bad? How can that be bad? So sin was another huge thing that I had a major problem with. The tendency of the church as a whole to blame the victim. Okay? Whatever would happen, a girl was assaulted, it was because she dressed a certain way. Or I was actually, and I wanted to give a little bit extra in this video, so I'm going to give you an experience. Not going to go too in depth, but I was directly involved with an individual that, not involved romantically, but there was a situation and some bad shit went down, okay? And he did it. And I remember being in the office, like the deacon's office or whatever, and all the, I'll say authoritative men were in there. And I was in there, and we gave our spiel as to what happened. I mean, this happened on church grounds. This isn't something that happened outside of church and the church was handling it. It happened on the church grounds. I remember leaving the meeting feeling like that was the wrong thing to do, was to go handle it in the church. And as a result of that meeting, they kicked him out. And I remember standing up and saying to one of my, it was like a Sunday school teacher, one of the authoritative men, okay? And I said, why did the church kick him out? Like, yes, something bad happened, but if anyone needed Jesus, it was probably that fucking person, and you just kicked him out. And I remember having to stand up, like, yeah, what happened was bad. What happened was, to be perfectly honest, it was against the law, but this is the church. How dare we damn someone for a mistake, like, or a sin, really. I never saw that guy again. I was so hurt by the fact that they kicked him out, like he was nobody, like this big sin. They didn't want nothing to do with him. They were like, oh, he's left the path. No, he didn't leave the path. You kicked him off the fucking path. And that was so. Blaming the victim. Not that he was a victim, okay, but their tendency to turn the situation on its axis that didn't benefit anyone but these authoritative men. Now I keep saying authoritative men because in my particular church, the men wore the pants. And that went from preachers, deacons, people that hold the sermons, hold the church, hold positions of power in the church, were all men. And the women were usually cleaners and the bakers of the brunches and shit. And I never saw a man teach children's church. That was a woman's job. And then it went down, and therefore, like, the whole church held this marriage hierarchy where the men were on these pedestals. And they took, and I firsthand saw this happen when I would visit said people. These men would treat these women a certain way at home too, like they thought they had these divine rights to treat these women in a way that I was like, that's never ever going to fucking happen to me. and it really, I think that the hierarchy stems from like the Bible stories and how literal they're taken. And I never took them literally. A lot of it seemed so poetic. And as a poetry lover and as a poetry writer, I was like, hell, all this seems to be real symbolic, real good prose, right? And I thought that by it being symbolic, it was open for interpretation. And in my church, it wasn't. It was not open. Everything was really laid out in like an outline / timeline that we all had to follow. Sexual purity. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you a little hint. Sexual purity is for women in the church, not for men. And I remember being 14, right? We were all 14 at one point. I remember being 14 and being like, so I can't have sex until I'm married, right? I remember thinking, what is the point of being pure? When you have those urges, you have to get down on your knees and pray. Remain abstinent until marriage. You will find a God-fearing boy that loves you. For some reason, I had huge problems with this because I had genuine urges as a teenager going through puberty. Looking back on what that did to me and how I did not have a sexual health support system. No one telling me about condoms or STDs. Like, rarely did it come up in the school system. And nobody, no family to talk to about the urges, no way to combat and have the dialogue as a female. And I think with the sexual purity also came the hierarchy. Like if we're pure, then that even goes more onto the men being, you know, above us in some sense. This is just like a whole Adam Eve thing that's going on here, and which led to me. It started to open my eyes when I started seeing the marriage hierarchy in other couples, and how seemingly unhappy the women were. Okay, not that they would really show it, but seemingly unhappy. I started noticing something else. Unquestionable obedience from everyone in the church. And I remember thinking, sure, I mean, I'll be a good girl, don't break the law, don't have sex, but then I still have to not only obey my parents, and then of course, like police officers, right? People that hold authoritative positions, but I also have to be unquestionably obedient to these deacons, these men at the church. For me, I was able to devote. I seemed to be able to devote myself freely up until teenagehood, right? Really freely. I was praying, I was devout, I read my Bible, blah 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 blah, you know. I kept my urges, you know, locked. But then I started to mature. And ignoring my body and ignoring my urges. And seeing others throw hate. Hearing them minister to people on their deathbeds. These we would literally go to nursing homes and boys and girls clubs and preach to these people about you have to pray to our God and you must, you know, come see the light on our side. And how hurt I was to see the look on these people's faces when that would happen. Like, we're supposed to love everyone, but they're wrong for praying to this God. No one wanted to discuss science. No one wanted to discuss the body or the urges or like current events that would like cut the church, you know, be cutting at the church for fear of damnation, like this blind faith fog that seemed to be. I was wearing my gas mask. Nobody else was. That's what I felt like. Now, as I matured, like I said, I seemed to mature and learn about the world and other cultures, learn more and more about sex health. It was like I was not ripping myself like a Band-Aid, but kind of tearing myself slowly. Like, and when you sever yourself from religion, that in and of itself is traumatic. Because what the church for you actually is, and was for me, is not just spiritual. It's not just a spiritual space. It's not just a spiritual place. It's not just the house of God, how my church people called it. It's an emotional place. These are your friends. These are the people you've known since birth. These are your mentors. These are your teachers, spiritual teachers that are trying to do good by you. You know, like it takes a village, right? Type of a mindset that my church tended to have. A social place. When, you know, we would have get-togethers, we would have friends, we would have sleepovers there with the youth groups. And so when you sever yourself, it's traumatic, and was for me, because I was severing myself emotionally, physically from these people, and then also socially. I didn't have those ties socially with that huge group of people that I grew up with. And the fear of abandonment was strong. I was abandoning these people to keep living how they lived. I started making pro and con lists about what that would ultimately do, you know? And the people that I did tell what that did, the small people, like a friend, a girlfriend here, or, a friend here, a mentor there, a couple of people I told that this just wasn't for me, it was like the worst thing that could possibly have happened to me. Lennon's possessed. Lennon's gone to the dark side. We have to pray for Lennon. She's going to be in our prayers next week. I started to become this thing that was on everyone's to-do list. I was no longer a person after that. And that led to plenty of self-sabotage as well, because I stopped, self-confidence issues, self-issues in general. Just all that led to grief, plain and simple. Severing myself ultimately was a grief, and I had to go through all the stages, and I'm still going through them. Really, I feel great, because what happened was, after severing myself, I let go of organized religion in a total sense, and then I kind of built up my spiritual practice over time. Our experiences mold and shape us, and as I matured, as I realized that I was a spiritual person, that I needed spirituality in my life. I just didn't need it in a dogmatic, fearful, sinful, just this bubble of self-denigration. I didn't need all that. Then, as I build and build and build my spiritual practice, I add things, even if it is coming from a religious standpoint, like prayer, the power of words I put behind some of my witchcraft, and those are powerful things. But I was praying for myself, not I was praying for myself and what I wanted to manifest, and it was for me, 100% mine, and not to this deity, this God that couldn't make up his mind whether he loved me because I was on my knees praying to him, or if he hated me because I committed a sin. And if he couldn't make up his mind, how was I supposed to stay devoted? I couldn't. The constant, am I loved today or am I hated today? This conditional love was not for me. And it felt conditional. When I visit cities today, I often go to the big cathedrals, right? The big Catholic, beautiful cathedrals, and I can feel a presence. I can feel a spirit. I oftentimes get emotional. And I've had a sibling before tell me that that's the spirit calling me back, right? I don't think it is. I don't think that it's calling me back. It's calling to me not because I need it. It's calling to me because I can feel it now by myself. I didn't need anybody's help. I didn't need no more blind obedience. The obedience was going to be from me. And I think the hardest thing that I endured when I won't say upon the severance, because there was a huge relief there for years upon, the alarm would go off on Sunday and I would have this dread, right? But I didn't have to go. So I was building up a sense of relief from the severance. But then when I started building up my spiritual practice from zero, basically, I started realizing that this Christianity, this dogmatic form of religion, was ingrained into everything. It's on the dollar bill. In God we trust. It's God bless America from the presidents. It's swearing on Bibles in court. It was ingrained into everything. This hierarchy, and how it was like a big pyramid scheme. And that's just not something that I wanted to. I didn't want my spiritual practice to keep focusing on that. And how, with it being ingrained, the thought that was always there was, what if they were right? What if I'm wrong? And I would have to tell myself every day, do I feel wrong? Do I feel wrong in here? Do I feel 100 today? What am I going to do to make myself feel 100 today? And I started to build from zero, and that really, really helped. The guilt, it helped the guilt from the severance, the shame from sin, the fear of death, because we won't know where we're going to go. No matter how devout we are, we're not going to know where we end up after death. So the fear of death doesn't need to be there. For me, that was always my thought. That's why I wear this. It's my memento mori. We're all going to die. The scythe is coming for us all. And breathing in the smog was not helping. How I'm going to turn it around to benefit me so that I can be the best possible person I can be. I can be grateful for all that I've learned in that life and not. And keep being proud of myself for how far I've come since the severance. Sacred things in my practice that I love, that hold the spirit of myself, all that is me, my soul in it. And once I realized loving myself, ultimately for me, was living for myself. And I wholeheartedly believe in religious trauma syndrome. It's fairly new. And how there's triggers. And going back to the beginning of this video, some of the comments on that testimony video aren't nice. Like I said, some of them are really mean. Some of them are Bible blasting. I've endured that my whole life, people, okay? But you have no clue that you could trigger someone else with that comment. That you could trigger someone else who's going down this path with no support system. Who's going down this path and they are scared to sever themselves. They're scared to pick up that tarot deck because they've been convinced it's of the devil. They are scared to pick up any book on science because, that's of the devil. And they have no one holding their hand and saying, the lightning's not coming, honey. It is hard to have that crumbling fear with that. So when you Bible blast us, and when you tell us that it's just rebellion, and when you tell the witches, well, this is what the Bible says about witches. Well, go read another Bible. Okay? Don't read just a Christian Bible. I'm thinking about the people that are living this trauma. They're living it every day. Maybe they're still in the closet. Maybe they haven't fully severed themselves. And they come on my video in secret on their phone, thinking that they're finding some invisible friend through my video, and they scroll down because, as we do, we look at the comment sections, right? And they see all the people blasting me. They're getting blasted too. That's not my intention. I don't want you to be triggered. So right now, as I'm going to hold space for you as a human, I'm pouring love on you as a human, as someone that's still healing from this trauma, that's someone that still battles with the guilt and the shame. What the trauma is doing to my body and in my brain these days, years later. And if we're respectful and knowledgeable and loving and giving people dignity for any path they're walking, that's how we're going to evolve as humans. As humans who love each other, no matter who they are. And I will be talking about this more, this RTS, because I've lived it, I am living it, and I'm very passionate about it. And I'll leave some articles for you below. I've read a couple of actual personal accounts that were, so good, brought me to tears. And a couple of actual articles on RTS that I'll leave below that I think are really good and really helpful. And if you have anything to add, leave it below. Much love.